welcome back to the Edge podcast. We have a very special guest today. We actually had the opportunity to work on the same department at Nike, not necessarily the same team because they're so big. But he worked at Nike, had the opportunity to go to Man U and did strategy and marketing, and is currently the director of special projects and strategy at the Chicago Fire. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, AK. Thanks for inviting me on. This is pretty cool.
Definitely no. I think I would love to start, I guess, with your journey, and now that you've kind of had the ability to kind of look both across, internally at a corporate working kind of finance, but now also having, been at a European team and now also an American-based team. I guess just at a high level, before we kind of really dive in, what does your day-to-day, I guess, roles and responsibility look like as, the director of special projects and strategy for the Fire?
Yeah, so I feel like every day it changes. So as director of strategy and special projects, my goal is to help the Fire turn around its financial balance sheet and overall P&L. So I think I came in about a year ago, and my one goal was like help us turn this ship around financially. So my goal is to like work with each of the leaders on each of the departments with all the different projects they have going on, and just help get those projects over the finish line, make sure they're as well done, professional, high quality as possible, so that we can reach that goal faster. So it's been a really good entrance into the sports world so that I can, learn how each of these departments in a sports team is run.
Gotcha. No, makes a lot of sense. And something, I guess, from my perspective, that's a little unique in terms of like MLS positioning. I think a lot of other, of these bigger leagues may not necessarily, obviously they do have a bunch of different special projects and things going on, but at some level, I think the activation and, all these projects to drive fan engagement in the MLS is so much more crucial as you kind of see the amount of people interested in soccer, playing soccer in the States kind of rise. So I guess from your perspective point of view, I guess what over the last kind of year, what have been some projects and initiatives that the Fire has kind of rolled out and done, maybe kind of unique to the team's ethos?
Yeah, I think it's what you said is really true in our sense, where I think we see this as like a couple year really important period before the World Cup comes to really build up our fan base and have it so that hopefully when that tsunami of popularity comes after the World Cup, we are ready to take advantage of it. So actually, I think there was a study done in the last couple of years by BCG that showed that while obviously what happens on the pitch is super important, what happens around the stadium is just as, if not more important. So that fan experience is crucial to keeping people around. And so we're really diving deep and doubling down in our investments on fan experience and making sure that people, when they come to a Fire game, have an amazing time and want to come back. So everything from, as simple as when we score a goal or at the beginning of the game, there's fire that goes up in the air. I mean, we're called the Fire. So it's like little stuff like that makes it more exciting. Or, just around the concourse, we play at Soldier Field and making sure that the concessions experience, making sure the merch experience, everything else that goes around there is as top notch as we can get it, because we want these people coming out, having a good time and wanting to come back.
For sure. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I think there's extra emphasis on kind of the fan retention. I was reading an ESPN article that just dropped last week saying the Fire, Messi recently obviously got injured, and then y'all are playing Inter Miami at home coming up in a few weeks. And obviously due to the injury and the possibility Messi might not play, the team is offering, I think it was $100 off of any single game, 2 or more single game tickets, $250 off of any season tickets, and then I want to say a free invite to the fan night game, fan appreciation game against Nashville. So I guess from a fan's perspective and a potential fan's perspective, looking at that, it seems like the team really does care about the longevity of the fan base and really returning. So I'd love to hear, I guess, how that discussion came about internally, and kind of the execution of that.
Yeah, so it started last year. So this, unfortunately, a similar circumstance happened last year where Messi got hurt about 3 or 4 weeks, I think, before the game, and it was like a
Gotcha.
constant back and forth if he was going to play. And then it turned out that we had this idea come up where it's like, why don't we just offer credit to people to come back if he plays or if he doesn't play. Our biggest goal was building long term fans in this city for the Fire. So while we obviously wanted to maximize that game financially, however we could, it was more important to us to continue to build out that fan engagement and fan retention, like you said. So that happened last year and saw a lot of success with it. People seem to really like that. And we got a lot of season tickets. I think we got 700 plus season ticket members coming out of that offer alone. And so then this year, when he got hurt again, we've been trying different levers to continue to get people to purchase tickets, whether it's a Jason Derulo concert post game, or really trying to engage different fan groups from all these different angles. But when we kept thinking about it, we're like, we want people to come out and have a good time first and foremost. So why don't we run back that offer and change it in certain ways to really prove that we have this fan first mentality at heart, where it's like, hey, we understand that you want to come out. A lot of them are coming out to see this one player, but we don't want you to not come out because of that, and give you a little safety net or insurance or guarantee that if it doesn't come out, why don't you come out and try us again another time?
No, definitely. And I think, from an emerging league, not necessarily emerging, but I kind of like we discussed earlier that keeping on that rising tide momentum, I think it's crucial. And going back, I guess double clicking on the fan experience specifically, I've only had the chance to go to one MLS game, and that was the Timbers game that Nike took us to,
Yep.
and I was totally blown away by the fan experience, right? And we were even sitting in the Timbers section, and for anyone who hasn't been to, I'm sure most people watching this or listening have been to a Timbers game, but they have a Timbers section, and it's like smoke grenades, smoke bombs everywhere, and when they score, it's amazing. And so you kind of mentioned the Fire aspect. Is there anything else this season that y'all have kind of rolled out?
Yeah, it's. I think the other one to really call out is, and this goes back to Portland. Like they have some really good built-in traditions that they do. Like when they score the goal, they have the guy with the axe or whatever that chops down the wood. Like that's a really cool, unique tradition that their supporters really love. And our supporters are great, but we're also looking for other new traditions that we could add in. And so we added this new one pregame called "Sound the Alarm." And so it's this like right in front of the supporter section, we try to have a celebrity or, some local hero or something like that come out and be the person to sound the alarm before the game. And it's they have like this axe that they break into the glass and then they pull down the fire alarm. And so
Wow.
we've seen that really, I think, get a lot of traction where we've had Andre Drummond and a lot of other like athletes or celebrities come and do that and get the kind of the energy started before the game. So I'd say that's the other big one that we've rolled out, seen a lot of success. I could see that going for a long time.
Gotcha. No, that makes a ton of sense. And from I guess from my perspective, and I guess from a getting the fan to seamlessly get to the arena, make the entire, I guess, control the entire value chain, if you will. I guess historically most teams, you know, ultimately once the person steps foot in the arena, then it's really when they're able to monetize. But I, doing some research and saw that the team recently inked a partnership with the Chicago Pier or the Navy Pier, and kind of rolling out, a peer to pitch campaign. And just from my initial, look at it, having the ability to host a kind of what's it called, like a tailgate event, and then directly get fans onboarded onto the ferry, which would then directly take them to the stadium. That's kind of amazing. So would love to hear, I guess, that obviously seems like a much larger special project, much larger activation timeline. So, would love to start all the way at the beginning when this thought kind of came to mind, and I guess the different considerations around this.
Yeah. So our president, Dave Baldwin, I think, at the end of last year, he even tasked me and other people with like, how can we grow our database or grow the amount of people that we can reach out to and show our what we're capable of and what we can do. And so his thought was like, can we reach out to a lot of these local, really popular institutions and build out some partnerships with them that doesn't really have to even be like, traditional sponsorship where we give them marketing assets and they give us money. It's like, can we trade, we're both Chicago, institutions. Can we both just trade what we're good at and kind of make it a 1+1 = 3 situation? So after that, I helped arrange these partnerships with the Shed Aquarium, which is right next to Soldier Field. So that was like a natural fit. Navy Pier, which is one of the most popular, places, tourist attractions in Chicago. And then we also have one with the Lincoln Park Zoo. And so these like strategic trade partnerships, I think are really important and are going to continue to be important as we continue to grow them, because they allows us to, one, activate at their space. Like you said, with the peer to pitch, it's a really unique experience that not many other cities or teams can really claim to do. And so you're giving someone a really memorable experience. But then also there's so many other things at the pier that we can activate on, whether it's their block parties. We're hopefully going to have a watch party there next month. And so it's just trying to take advantage of that huge audience that they already have. Or whether it's, even a simpler way is getting integrated into their e-news campaigns. So if they're sending out an email every week to 200,000 people, and they can include a note in there about our upcoming match against Inter Miami, like that's just an easy way to get in front of 200,000 people. You know what I mean? So I'd say like these trade partnerships are not supposed to be huge. They're not huge revenue drivers indirectly in and of themselves, but it's one of those things that I think helps to grow fandom, grow engagement long term, and just grow goodwill and with really top notch partners in the city. So I've been really happy with building those partnerships so far, and I think we picked 3 really good ones to start out with.
Definitely, that's awesome. Will we be seeing a bean partnership anytime soon?
That's next on the list for sure.
Awesome, sweet. No, I can't. In my head, there's so many kind of guerrilla marketing things that I guess we'll chat a little bit offline. But no, that's awesome. I think having a city where you can really, that already has that base set culture, that the team kind of layers on top and then can really dive into different routes is really exciting. I think that's something at some level the Timbers might have lacked. I guess for an extended period of time now, I guess the city's kind of not done too well. But no, that's amazing. I guess, and from the revenue generation driver standpoint, I guess maybe from even the marketing standpoint, where in the funnel, I guess, is it hard to where's there a gap in the funnel ultimately? Like, is it really hard for the team, I guess, over the top to come in on activation? Because I'm assuming, the advertising billboard space around Chicago must be, super expensive. So are there any, innovative ways the team has kind of found to kind of plug those different gaps?
It's a good question. I think, honestly, we probably, want to increase our, marketing at every point of the funnel, but it starts at the top. So like, we just don't have the brand awareness yet that the Cubs or the Bears, or the Blackhawks do to some extent. So it's like, we need to make people aware that, not only are we here in the city, but like we, play at Soldier Field. Like some people still think that we play at the old stadium that we played at, kind of in the suburbs of Chicago. So I think it starts there. But then it's also like, how do you actually make them aware of the upcoming matches and actually drive that purchasing decision? And so we had our new chief marketing officer, Dan Moriarty, join earlier this year, and he's really doubled down on digital marketing. Just realizing, I think that there was probably a gap there in what we were doing and what could be done. And so he's brought in some people to really focus in on that area. And we've seen a lot of success with driving that out and getting people to see our marketing where they most frequent. So whether it's on Instagram, I actually get bombarded with our own ads all the time, which I guess is good.
Makes sense, right? The SEO's working. The SEO's working.
Exactly. So I think that's been important, but I think it starts with the overall brand awareness and just getting people to know that, we are a top professional team in a top professional league, and they should come check us out.
Gotcha. And in terms of the split between the guidelines the overall league kind of provides, and I guess like the ultimate runway you guys have from more of a, I guess, pseudo brand. I guess obviously you can't really change the brand once it's kind of set, or it's much more difficult in terms of it. But in terms of just general marketing, even types of projects, is there, yeah, what are the kind of broader limitations or things that the team in terms of upholding the league rules or allowing kind of some level of fairness between other teams? Is there a split there? And then I guess on y'all's side of just having that opportunity to run and just create new projects, what does that kind of look like?
You mean just like from a marketing sense, or just across there, like how the league,
From a marketing sense, and also I guess just a project sense, if that kind of makes sense. Is there anything that's kind of maybe a super small market team can't access this particular type of strategy, or just like a league wide rule is just like this specific type of strategy or these specific entities, like we would just not like y'all to partner with them or
Yeah,
etc.
no, there's definitely a lot of different league rules across marketing, across sponsorships, just around like, who we can and can't market to, who we can't, be sponsored by. But I think, those rules go so that they can kind of be applied to all the teams. So, for example, like I remember I was trying to do a couple pretty innovative merchandising things last year that had to work its way through the league office and get approval through, a bunch of different ways there. So it's like the league is always thinking about these things, and they like being made aware of the innovative ways we're trying to think about marketing or merchandising. But they do have a lot of rules that you need to kind of work through. But I think it's all to try and build the league at a sustainable rate. So it's nothing that we're not necessarily in alignment with.
Gotcha, for sure. No, and speaking about the league expanding, it's a perfect segue from you teeing me up here. I know the league officially introduced two new teams last year, Charlotte FC and St. Louis SC. And then obviously the actual league, there was League Cup kind of introduced, the expanded tournament format. And so I guess from your guys' perspective now, obviously those two new entrants plus a different type of event you have to create marketing and activation around. I guess how is that kind of, either has it materially shifted the team strategy? Is it just something you're adding on top of another kind of specific tick to kind of tackle? But how do you guys view all of that from, I guess, a top-down perspective? Holistically, as you look at your season, you plan activation across everything.
Yeah, so I think separately with the expansion teams and then Leagues Cup, it's a little different. Like expansion teams doesn't really impact our day to day too much. However, St. Louis being one of them does, because it's just so close in proximity. So I think last year, right before I arrived, we played them. Um, and because there's a huge rivalry between Chicago and St. Louis anyway, we just really leaned into that, and we created these, I think, shirts that said like Chicago is greater than St. Louis or something, and they were one of the biggest selling items of the year. So I think another way for MLS to grow is trying to lean into and build these rivalries. I mean, you think about NFL. I'm from Philadelphia. It's like Cowboys Eagles is a real big thing, or pick your big league. There's rivalries that everyone always tunes into. So from that standpoint, expansion is great, and it can only serve to continue to grow the league nationwide. Leagues Cup then also helps it grow internationally. So I think the combination, so Leagues Cup, for anyone who doesn't know, is a tournament between MLS clubs and Liga MX clubs, and so it's really unique in that it's like they come over here, they play a couple games, and then it's like a knockout round. And um, last year saw a lot of success with it, especially with Inter Miami going on and winning it. Um, but it's a really good way to take a lot of that audience that already tunes into the Mexican League. I think actually I saw a stat last year that the Mexican League is the second most watched soccer league in the U.S. behind the
Wow.
Premier League. So there's just so many people that are already built-in audience and fans here in the U.S. So be able to tap into those and continue to expose those people to MLS, even through their Mexican team, their Mexican club, is really important. And here in Chicago, the Hispanic population is really large. So just being able to double down on that, I think Leagues Cup is going to only continue to grow for the league.
Gotcha. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess the general trend of European players kind of making the transition to MLS. I know MLS 15 years ago was like the retirement league, and now you have big time players really coming over, and kind of I guess a huge influx of attention has been brought on, and I guess the League Cup expanding just makes the overall opportunity set for a player closer, or I guess entering slash closer to their prime to make the jump to MLS. So I guess from the team's perspective, I guess in your role specifically, what's been the dynamic of interfacing with front office of like, okay, here's potential player whose contract is coming up, and if we got X, Y, and Z player, this is the kind of activation we would have, obviously combined with the existing athletes as well as the kind of homegrown talent that are rising through the academy. But what have those conversations kind of been like internally?
It's really interesting because it's a really separate. I don't know how it is at all the other clubs, but especially here, it's very separate. Where there's the business side that I'm on, and then the sporting side that makes all those player personnel decisions. However, they understand that it's a business too, so they'll often be talking to our president of business operations, Dave Baldwin, and they'll be like, "Hey, I think we're getting close to potentially signing this person. Thoughts?" And then Dave will pull me and a couple of my colleagues aside and be like, what do you think of this guy? Is he going to move the needle? And we're like, yeah, he played for the U.S. national team or something like that. So it's I would be lying if I said we had a huge impact on that, because at the end of the day, they probably shouldn't listen to us too much around player personnel. Like if that's their job, so they should
Yep.
be the ones doing that. But at the same time, all things equal, if one person is going to help put a lot more butts in seats, hopefully that does play a little bit of an impact. But I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. We're just, in my personal opinion, where I think the league is trying to go in the long term, where it's like, can we continue to get younger and younger stars coming over? So while before you get the guy when he was 38, now can you start getting him in his earlier and earlier 30s, while also on the other side developing stronger and stronger talent through our academies? And so, I look here at the Fire, we have, we've been able to transfer a couple of our top young talents like Gaga Slonina last year to Chelsea, and then John Duran to Aston Villa. So it's like you start seeing this wave of European clubs paying attention to the young players coming through our academies. And over time, I think you just find this middle ground, but it may take a long time, but I think it's gonna, it's kind of inevitable at this point.
Definitely. And I think, speaking of the academies, I think obviously been, I guess a lifeline for a lot of the European teams, but I obviously know in the States, more teams, it's been a kind of more recent trend. So from your perspective, also when looking at the kind of folks that are coming up through the academy, is there, I guess, what have conversations been around, or I forgot reading about, I think there was a left back that played that came up through academy, and I think he had a really big game. I want to say end of last year. Blanking on the name. But in terms of academy stars, what, from a retention standpoint, I guess if you will, what's the biggest barrier as of now? Obviously, excluding just this is a bigger league over there, or just more eyeballs. But in terms of how the team is looking to kind of retain their homegrown talent, are there any steps being set into place particularly?
Yeah, I think it's again, this is just personal opinion being on the business side, but I think a lot of these guys, if they want to go over to Europe, it's kind of going to be inevitable if they're very good, at least still at this point. So you almost want to, kind of build a reputation around being someone that can get you to where you want to go. and hold on to them as long as you can. So I think the MLS has done a good job of trying to create within its complexity and around the salary cap and everything, try to create a way to help do that. So there's these homegrown type players that can come through, and there's certain salary cap metrics like the U22 initiatives that allow you to pay these young players a lot of money and then not have it really impact the salary cap too much. It's like a fixed rate. So in that sense, you're allowed to pay the players more than they probably would get in Europe to stay a little bit longer, continue developing, getting a lot more playing time, and then when they're ready to make the jump, they can. So, but also I think those players, especially homegrown local players, they are the most popular because kids see them, they know they're from the hometown, and they want to be just like them. So, example, we have a couple of our stars right now: Chris Brady, our goalkeeper, Brian Gutierrez, both starters, both homegrown talents from the Chicago area. And when you see them after the kids after the games, like those are the guys that they're going after. So for autographs. So I think it's just so vitally important at all aspects to have a really strong youth development system. And I think the Fire have a really great one. And we're building I think it's $100 million performance center that should be done here in the next couple months. That's aimed at helping both, obviously, first team, second team to practice all the time and produce results on the pitch, but then also that academy, those youth players, just making sure they're getting the best of the best, state of the art to help exactly what we just talked about.
Yeah, no, makes a ton of sense. And speaking of the new performance center, I guess when were you able to assist any part of, I guess, the planning or like the selection of the actual real estate, and kind of what did that process ultimately kind of look like?
I wish I could take any kind of credit for it because it's a
Yeah,
really awesome facility. Actually, I just remember when I was interviewing for this role last year was when it was announced that it was like they're building it. So to see it come from that announcement to now, like they've not just moving dirt anymore. Like it's up, it's looking pretty good, is pretty remarkable. What I'll say is like I think the facility is going to be amazing, and I think part of that reason is because of the area that it's in. So it's going to be it's right off of like it's in the near west side of Chicago, and so it's going to provide like a lot of different jobs for the local community as well to come in. So and it's right near the downtown area of Chicago. So I think it's as far as like real estate goes, it's a great spot to have a home like that in the city, and also in an area that we can provide a lot of value to the community.
gotcha. No, makes a ton of sense. And I guess is the trend of, or no, maybe not necessarily trend, but obviously MLS valuation amongst other sports teams and leagues have been rising pretty sharply over the last 5 or 6 years. So the, I guess, have you been noticing a bunch of teams across MLS kind of, sprucing up or creating new performance centers, kind of shifting their, finding larger stadiums to, hold capacity? I know obviously in Austin, we have dude, how am I blanking on this name? Anyways, the Austin facilities
Yeah.
is massive. Was able to stop by. Didn't, unfortunately, wasn't able to go to a game there. But is this a kind of a recent more trend you guys are seeing? And I guess at some level, are kind of what's going on in the broader markets or anything kind of influencing or affecting, or is it ultimately just we're going to invest to
Yeah, I
make
think
our
no, it's a great question because I think these valuations as they're rising, part of it now is because the team is backed by some of the real estate that they hold, whether it's the stadium or the performance center. Now you can say that it's not just the collection of the players on the team; it's got some like strong real estate behind it. But I think the infrastructure is probably, since I started, probably the biggest realization I've had about where soccer's going in the next 10 to 20 years. Because on the stadium front, you see these new soccer specific stadiums being built in Cincinnati, in Columbus, in St. Louis for hundreds of millions of dollars that rival a lot of top stadiums in Europe. And so, and because they're created for soccer, there's the atmosphere is just incredible. And so it's loud, it's exciting. It goes back to that fan retention that we were talking earlier. It's like you go to these games, how can you not have a good time? So the stadium aspect is really important for game day and building fan retention and all of that. And then the performance centers are for the two sides of the player angle, like we talked about, for both youth development and just making like world class soccer talent that can either be used, can play here or can play wherever they want in the world, essentially. And then also having that be a recruiting tool to bring in stars early and earlier from Europe. So they don't really see this huge downgrade in facilities coming over from, your Premier League team. So I honestly think the sky's the limit for where and that infrastructure is going to take the league over time.
For sure. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess from the actual stadium perspective, I know I've seen this kind of trend across NFL stadiums more recently, where you have these like ultra premium tier seating, either right next to the sideline or specific suite style. So I guess from the perspective of, I guess maybe just a broader MLS as well as, the Fire specifically, what's been, I guess, the thought process between, making sure there's enough seats accessible to the broader public as a brand tries to build itself and retain that value, as well as also catering to the kind of higher margin, ultra high end, the quote unquote more best fan experience. But what does that split kind of look like?
So it's interesting for us because we play at Soldier Field. Like there's 60 some thousand seats available there. So we're not really hurting for capacity in any sense of the word, whether it's traditional seating or premium. So we can get pretty creative there. The downside there is we don't own the stadium. So we have to kind of really think through and deal with a lot of the scheduling headaches that come with, being part of a shared space with concerts and the Bears and all of that. So, but as far as like premium goes, Dave Baldwin, who I mentioned earlier, is president of business operation. He's coming from vast experience across the sports world, but it also includes the Miami Dolphins and Hard Rock Arena, which is like Hard Rock Stadium, which is Miami knows how to put on a premium event. Yep. So I think coming here, he knew exactly what he wanted to do as far as, okay, well, we can have these lounges right here behind the stadium. That kind of reminds me of what they had in Portland, like we saw when we were there. Or, can we have a lot more field side seats right behind the action? And personally, like I can attest to it. When you see the game from like the 200 level, it's great. But when you go down to the field, you just realize how fast and athletic these guys are. It's a totally different experience. And so being able to do that and show people exactly the experience they want, I think gives you a lot of room to sell, a lot of room to play with. And then as far as like actual suites go, Soldier Field has, I think, 100 something suites. Before Dave started, before last year, the Fire had 0 annual suites. So like people would maybe buy like a single game here and there, but we couldn't sell an annual one. And now going into next year, we're going to have close to 50. And that's before we even started really selling next year. So it's like that kind of stuff over time is just so instrumental to building relationships in the business world and creating a lot of consistent revenue that you can count on year after year as you grow the business.
No, for sure, makes sense. And when you say that, the first thing or person that pops into mind is the Toronto super fan. I don't know if you see. Yeah. It's been going for 25, 30 years, every single game courtside, and there's some level of like recognizability of him like embedded in the team. I think that's ultimately why I personally love sports, and I think it's ultimately what drives that.
There's a supporter for the Fire too. He's in the supporter section, and he's got what they call like a fambulance. So it's like an ambulance that's built out. He brings it to all the tailgates. Like that's someone that immediately comes to mind too. Is like that guy's he's been through thick and thin. Like he's a true fan.
No, definitely makes sense. We had at Texas this past year, we had a Bevo hat guy. And so you'd wear this hat of this big hat of Bevo at every single game. And he got so popular, like his own Instagram page, like started blowing up so much that the creative team at Texas was like, all right, AK for the pod, you probably should do a quick feature on him. And then, they had him in a bunch of other stuff. So I think it's, showing, I guess, the split between, I guess this is a pretty interesting conversation. I'd love to talk to you about the split between the organic marketing and push on social and really being to connect to fans. I guess leveraging obviously the athletes to kind of help tell their stories and kind of move that forward, but also balancing it with the more, I don't want to say necessarily professional, but just super polished, kind of what most people have come to expect from when you look at a sports page. But I think the trend is definitely moving towards a more organic. So I guess have there been any kind of fun or unique social media strategies, or I guess just marketing strategies more broadly that have kind of driven more success compared to previous strategies?
Honestly, it's a great question because I think it touches on a lot of what MLS is trying to do. So, obviously, social media. Who's the biggest, probably consumer social media? Probably a younger audience. Who do we really want to continue to help track to help grow lifelong fandom? Probably that younger audience. And who's consuming soccer at the most and helping the game grow as quickly as it is? That younger audience. So, how can we use social media to make sure that we're building that fandom through there and telling the messages that we want to? So, we have to play that fine line. I think our marketing team does a great job of, okay, here's what our bread and butter that we have to do for every game and for our sponsor commitments because they're part of our roster and we agreed to do this type of content for them. Versus like, hey, it's social media. It should be fun. It should be playful in certain areas. Like, for example, I think a couple games ago the internet wasn't working, so we weren't able to get the right kind of graphic for the halftime score update. So what did we do? Like the marketing team just drew a couple stick figures with like the jerseys on them or something, just threw it together and was like, hey, here's what we can do. And it's like little stuff like that, I think ends up being pretty popular. Or, there was a whole, and this goes on to the players too. So there was a whole thing where um, this guy went back and found that one of our strikers, Kutsias, we were like winning a bunch when he had his jersey tucked in versus when he didn't have it tucked in. So they reached out to one of our star players, Kellen Acosta, and was like, hey, can you go tell Kutsias to tuck in his shirt next time? and and so then the guy was like, yeah, I'm on it. Like, and he ended up like putting it on and became a whole huge thing within our supporters and everything. And so, we really leaned into that in social media. We created a t-shirt for it for people to buy. And we went around our front office, like just asking people what the slogan that we came up for it meant. And so we've seen a lot of traction with that too. So it's like, I think you gotta remember that it's sports and it should be fun and it should be playful at times, while also still trying to and being a little bit edgy too where you can, but then also balancing that with just being professional and real and what goes along with being a top flight league.
Definitely. No, makes a lot of sense. And no, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to go pull up this stick figure drawing and put it
I'll
up
send
on
it to you.
screen. No, that's awesome. I guess would love to take a step back and dive a little bit more into your personal story. Obviously you've kind of had the range of experience within within kind of sports, but would love to, if you could provide a quick breakdown of kind of what you were doing before pursuing your MBA at Duke and kind of pivoting into sports, and then ultimately what was the main driver that made you want to pivot into sports?
Yeah, so grew up in Philly, massive sports fan, but also loved like the business side of sports and just seeing like different trades and analyzing NBA salary cap, like all that kind of stuff was what I was really into. Went to University of Richmond for undergrad and was a manager on the men's basketball team there. And just being around like a really top flight team like that, day in, day out, traveling with them to some away games, being there for every home game, I'm like, I really, really want to work in sports at some point in my career. And so I made it kind of like my goal at that point that I had to make that happen. But I wanted to like work in business, get my chops in with some business skills starting out of undergrad. So started out in accounting at PwC right out of undergrad, and spent 2.5 years there. Got my CPA, enjoyed that. I think I learned a ton, and then moved over to an investment fund in Philly for a couple of years. doing a lot of like the financial reporting a lot of the different funds within there. And really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the people I worked with. But after a couple of years there, I was like starting to still have that itch for, okay, is this helping me get any closer to sports? No, I could have a career in this. It's great, but if I'm ever going to make that jump, I probably need to start making it soon. I'm entering my late 20s. So I had heard a couple of people reach out or like talk about their experience in the NBA from undergrad, but didn't really know much about it. The more I looked into it, I'm like, this might be that exactly what I need to make that pivot and get into the type of sports role that I want to. And so I'm really, really glad I went down that rabbit hole and figured it out, because getting into Duke and just embracing everything, that whole sports culture that they have, it really opened my eyes to what's possible. And so just really leaning into the athletics department there, ended up doing the internship at Nike, like you talked about with you. That was all great. Like that Nike internship was like life
Awesome.
dream complete, pinch
Yeah.
myself. Like I'd wake up and I'd be like, where's my meeting today? Oh, it's in the Michael Jordan building. Like it's just cool stuff that you can't really find elsewhere. However, like I think I realized that I wanted to try something with a more like real strong strategic lens that I wasn't having in my previous background as a CPA. And so I was like, if I really want to get into sports, now's the chance. Now's my time. I have to do it. Ready to come out MBA. And so I had to go down this whole like existential crisis of like, okay, do you really want to be in sports, or do you want to be in something sports adjacent right away? So it's like sports, I mean league or team. Sports adjacent, it could be your retail, so your Nike. It could be a sports tech. It could be like a sports finance, like a PE firm that invests in sports. So there's a lot of ways to be involved in the business of sports. So I really had to initially make that decision. I'm like, I've always wanted to work for a team. I think now's the time to do it. So check that off. And I was like, okay, what in my second year of my MBA can I do to prepare myself best for that? And so I was like, I have so much time on my hands, and now let's just do some free work for teams for whoever will take it. And so got connected with a former Duke Fuqua grad at the Arizona Coyotes. And so he let me intern with his business strategy team, and doing a lot of work there. And then Duke is part of this sports business alliance of MBA programs. And someone new there got connected with Manchester United. And they're like, hey, we need some help building out our US fandom. Can you get a couple people together to do that? So I immediately rose my hand and, was able to be part of that team. And that was a really, really cool experience, just like diving deep into, okay, what are United's strengths in the market? Where can they grow, especially here in the US, especially over the next couple of years leading into the World Cup? And like it was really valuable learning how a team like that's so global is still looking how to break into the US market the best way they can. I think getting that on my resume was probably that, and the Coyotes were really helpful in having, when I applied to sports jobs, people being like, okay, this isn't just another person. Like this guy has done it, and he knows what we're trying to accomplish. Um, and so ultimately, came down to a couple different offers, but this role here at the Fire was exactly what I'm looking for, because it was sitting right underneath Dave Baldwin, the president, and being able to see how he's doing this turnaround. He's seen these turnarounds at a lot of different places, whether it was the Dolphins are now one of the most well-run organizations in professional sports. The Commanders, seeing that turnaround. And so now he knows kind of the game plan and blueprint, but being able to learn that from him is pretty invaluable. And then being able to do this kind of generalist role for now, where I'm learning about marketing, I'm learning about sponsorships, I'm learning about ticketing, legal, like finance, you name it, is exactly what I would want out of my first role coming out of business school. So, I mean, it was really tough, not going with Nike coming out of our internship, but if I had to turn it down, I think this is the type of role that I'm glad I did.
No, definitely makes sense. And when it comes to teams and leagues specifically, when when you are an MBA student, what do the roles within those teams typically look like? Is it kind of more strategy focused, similar to the role you're kind of in, or is it maybe just like FP&A or kind of more broad? Because I know obviously a bunch of most teams and leagues just run super lean. So I'm assuming like you have to wear multiple hats at most spots, but I guess just from a opportunity set and what you were specifically trying to target, what did that kind of landscape ultimately look like?
It's interesting. A lot of roles from just what I've seen, there's not a lot of this like corporate strategy type departments in sports teams. A lot of it is like a BI, business intelligence, or we call it here business strategy and analytics. And nothing wrong with that at all. But I don't have that like deep coding, software, analytics background to have like really think made a have to differentiate myself among other candidates coming out of MBA. Where I think I could is this type of role where, um, I don't know what I don't know, but I can go figure it out because in MBA that's kind of what you learn to do. So it's those types of roles in like BI or BSA, like we call it, are a lot more common in sports teams. I think you're starting to see more corporate strategy, chief of staff type roles popping up, but it's more of a rarity than the norm. But I think just the more you can find these types of roles and connect with similar types of people and learn about what they do, it can only serve you to as you keep building your career.
Definitely, and I think something that still shocks me is as popular and from a outside perspective, massive sports is like internally or inside the sports world from a business standpoint, so small. And so it's
Yeah,
kind of I
small
always
world
get the
for sure.
question like how to ultimately break in. I had a bunch of people after Nike kind of reach out to me. And I was like, for Nike specifically, also, I was like, dude, honestly, I don't even know how I got it to some level. And there's so much luck. Like, when they're going through the statistics with us, like, 25,000 applications for like 180 spots. I'm like, dude, well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, dream type of internship, but that was. I remember that exact. I don't think I'll ever forget that meeting, and when they said that's that, and I'm just like, wow, I'm around some pretty impressive people. I don't know how I fell through the cracks, but everyone else.
No, no, no. No, that's amazing. And I guess to end this episode, typically ask three kind of rapid fire questions. And let's start with I typically ask who's the GOAT of your respective kind of role strategy, but I'll phrase it like this: what team? I guess maybe not in MLS, but just historically a team in another league that you've kind of from a fan activation, engagement, special projects kind of standpoint, do you consider the GOAT?
Oh, this is difficult because I'm trying to put my bias aside, but I think I have to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. And let me try to explain why so I can hopefully shed some of the biasness. But like, I think since I've been a kid, they've just done a really good job of growing that fandom very sustainably. Like, they're not like going out and that the way that they build out both their front office on the football side, but also on the business side is just, I think, it's very like with a long term focus, and you have the situation where people don't leave when they get in, and that doesn't happen very often if you can avoid it. So it's like they must be doing something right where people getting in and they feel that like family, that real part of the team, and that starts with Jeffrey Lurie at the top as the owner. So I think they've done such a good job building that fan base in Philadelphia, even though like this is before they won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Like the Philadelphia has always been an Eagles town, and that's just been really amplified since then. And you even see with like lines like the retro Kelly Green line that came out with merchandise last year, like sells out everywhere. I know this is rapid fire, so I know
No,
I'm
no,
going.
no, 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 no. It's question two. If the Richmond guys that you were the team manager for, if they could describe you in 3 words, what would those words be?
Hopefully, they would say I'm a team player, hard worker. Also, would say flexible. Like I'm able to like just kind of do whatever's asked at all the times. Um, humble. Humble's a good one, maybe. Like, I try not to take myself too seriously. I try to work hard and be ambitious, but I am aware I got a long way to go.
No, that's awesome. And then the final question is, what is your edge? And to preface obviously the title or the name of the podcast is The Edge. And the ethos is pretty much, if you're a top tier athlete or a top tier person in sports administration, you've obviously risen above the rest, and you are in that kind of top 0.0001 percent. And so ultimately, what do you believe is that special piece in your toolkit, or something that you rely on ultimately that has driven you to this level of success and continue driving you to the level of success?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably just if I had put in like a word, it'd be relationships. So it's like I think I'm realizing how blessed I am to have the family, friends, and like mentors that I do, because I think they've really instilled a lot of really, qualities that I am happy that they did as a kid, whether it was, the humbleness like I talked about, or just that work ethic, um, knowing that like there's always someone out there working harder than you. My grandparents came over from Italy with nothing, so like just being able to see how hard they worked for the life that they have, it makes you feel like you want to work harder to prove that all their hard work was worth it. Um, and then my friends just like being around such smart and ambitious people too, like you kind of naturally are magnetized to that. And then mentors, like it's just crazy that if all the different ways I could have gone, but some people were there to help kind of put me on the right track. Like, why are you thinking about that? Why don't you just pay attention to this? So that I think has helped me continue to just stay focused and get to where I want to be. And so I think all of that falls underneath this umbrella of just relationships and being able to build that strong network. And then I hope I can be that for them too. Like I try to be, the relationship has to be both ways. It can't be transactional one way. So that's helped me, I think, get this far. Hopefully it doesn't stop here.
No, definitely won't. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Nick. If there's anything Chicago Fire, non-Chicago Fire FC related that you would love to plug, the floor is yours.
No, AK, thanks a lot for having me. This is really cool experience, and podcast is only going to continue to grow. If you're in the Chicago area, come check us out, Chicago Fire FC, Soldier Field.
Of course.
It's a great time for whether you're a family, want to bring out the kids for a game, young professional, want to come, check us out. We got something for everyone.
That's awesome. Like, comment, subscribe, all the fun stuff. And we'll catch you on the next episode.